How does one get to see a modern-day Leviathan? One only needs to travel to Brussels or Strasbourg and see the European Union in action. The European Union, the EU, came into being on November 1, 1993, when the Maastricht Treaty went into effect shortly after the end of the Cold War. The goal of European integration was to create European citizenship, strengthen the European Parliament, establish a shared currency, and implement common foreign and security policies. In 2012, when the European Union received the Nobel Peace Prize for transforming Europe from a continent of war to a continent of peace, Europe itself expressed its congratulations. As is often the case with powerful bureaucracies, the EU has expanded its influence into nearly every aspect of European business and life. In pursuit of that relentless need to expand power, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen requested a review of the intelligence readiness of the EU in March 2024 and assigned former Finnish Prime Minister Sauli Niinistö to lead the review. Foreign and security policies. In 2012, when the European Union received the Nobel Peace Prize for transforming Europe from a continent of war to a continent of peace, people half-jokingly refer to the recommendation as a proposal to establish a European Union version of the US CIA. Although the report is not legally binding, President von der Leyen accepted the recommendation in a public statement, which was not surprising given the overall predeterministic nature of the review assignment. In her public remarks, President von der Leyen stated that the EU should approach threats proactively, rather than reactively, and enhance the flow of information and intelligence gathering through existing EU security bodies. This suggests an expansion of the powers of current EU departments. Mr. Niinistö recommended that the EU establish a fully fledged intelligence cooperation service at the EU level, with the mission to serve strategic and operational needs. He added the adjective urgent to his recommendation, indicating that this expansion of power is necessary and mandatory for the safety of EU citizens. My God, think of the children at a birth rate of 1.46. The CIA does serve a necessary purpose, but even with all the protections of the US Constitution, it has illegally abused its power against American citizens since its creation after World War II in 1947. Can EU citizens believe that the EU, being the master of bureaucracy and the beacon of protecting individual rights without the need for the pesky Bill of Rights, will not encounter any issues with such a far-reaching intelligence service? Europe does collect intelligence, as evidenced by the existence of the fictitious James Bond. However, the individual states that comprise the 27 nations of the European Union have been responsible for this, with some having a more robust collection than others. Mr. Niinistö recommended that the EU's member countries should trust each other and begin sharing their information through the EU system. Although the EU does have intelligence services, their operational status restricts them to intelligence and threat analysis based on available information rather than intelligence collection. President von der Leyen wants to expand the agency powers of the European Union Intelligence and Situation Center and the European Center for Information and Security, which are the assigned EU departments. We need to reveal the details of this new directive's operationalization of EU intelligence, which are likely still incomplete. Mr. Niinistö makes the statement that European countries have to learn to trust each other when it comes to sharing intelligence. This suggests that the initial strategy involves European countries collecting information and disseminating it to the broader EU intelligence services audience. The question is whether the arrangement will involve EU country intelligence services pushing information about what they wish to share with the EU, or if it will be a pull arrangement where the EU has access to the intelligence collected from their member states and pull in what they want to review. Or will it be a pull arrangement where the EU intelligence services have open access to all the intelligence collected from its member states and disseminates information on what wants to review? Mr. Niinistö's intent is most likely a pull arrangement. There are still questions about whether the EU can order its member states' intelligence apparatuses to collect intelligence. The questions pertaining to push, pull, and tasking serve as interim measures, with the aim of gaining more control over intelligence agencies. Establishing an independent intelligence service that eventually supersedes state intelligence services could achieve this. Alternatively, it could establish a structure similar to the US, where the 19 U.S. intelligence services fall under the U.S. intelligence community, led by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Any of these options or variations would require the support of the member states. The question remains unanswered. Why does the EU gather intelligence? cyber warfare, industrial espionage, or possibly terrorism. These would be legitimate intelligence operations that could potentially impact the EU. However, much of intelligence collection is based on the military threat or evaluation of the military capability of potential adversaries. The EU does not have a military, so what is the purpose of having an expansive collection network similar to the CIA, the intelligence community, or the Russian FSB, the replacement of the Soviet KGB? As the EU does not have a military, and would not have a need to collect intelligence concerning military operations and capabilities, would the EU subordinate individual states' collections and dismantle or deprioritize military, air, and naval intelligence? Or does the EU intend to establish a military of its own that supersedes the military capabilities of its individual members? This is not surprising, given the close collaboration between intelligence services and the military establishment, both of which initially aimed to protect the state from external threats. The military establishment originally subordinated intelligence services to its needs. This decision could serve as a foundation for the introduction of a fully capable European military by delegating the task of intelligence collection to the EU. The EU could use this as a pressure tactic to convince individual states to transfer their military capabilities to the EU, given that their militaries currently lack access to EU military intelligence as a result of their integration. The militaries would need to reintegrate into the EU to regain access to military intelligence. This may come across as cynical, but it does support the idea that moving intelligence to the EU will eventually force another desired action on military integration. The idea of an EU intelligence apparatus does appear to have leadership support, but it is receiving opposition from parts of the EU. Czechia President Petr Fiala has expressed his opposition to intelligence integration, advocating for increased intelligence sharing among EU nations, and stating that further integration steps by the EU are unrealistic. Martin Dvorak, the EU Minister for Czechia, concurs with the President of Czechia, stating that a common EU intelligence service is not high on the EU's agenda. His spokeswoman also noted that the idea has not gained traction in the past. If the plan does not get support from the individual nations, it is doubtful that it can be effectively implemented even if the European Commission attempts to proceed without unanimous national support from the 27 member countries. The European Commission should have known about opposition before reviewing and recommending the idea. However, why did they proceed with the recommendation considering the opposition? Transparency is needed to understand the motives of the European Commission.